Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com. Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy show. And today, again, we got another wonderful guest from Canada this time. I love interviewing people from all over the world because everybody has kind of survived through the last year of our lives very differently, different expectations, different levels of communication and openness because of COVID, that it's been very fascinating to see the interactions of different people. So he's from Ontario, Canada. And just to give a little backstory on Mike, he's obviously going to go in a lot more detail, but Mike really likes to work with solopreneurs and help them monetize their skill sets and then develop them into systems and actual businesses. So many times we get stuck in the hobby form of life and like, oh, I'm going to do this side gig and it's just a hobby. It's not a business. But whether it's a business or not entirely depends on how you're approaching your hobbies. Or your just life, right? I'm a firm believer that even your household should be run like a business. Your relationships, like there's so much stuff that when you run them with clear expectations and contracts, everything's better in life. So I'm excited to have this conversation with you, Mike, but go ahead and share with us really where you came from. What was that early childhood like? And then how did you end up doing what you're doing right now? And what do you want to create into the world?
Absolutely. Well, Canadian, currently hiding in Mexico because it's cold and COVID was really terrible there. So I've actually been in Mexico for the better part of all of COVID pretty much, but home base is Toronto. So for me, I grew up in a suburb just outside of Toronto, a little place called Oakville. Shout out to Oakville, I guess. We had I would say kind of that, middle class in the middle class in terms of like the economic area that our family was in. Pretty good childhood up until kind of age 8, 9, and then parents split up. So that was kind of it adds a lot of turmoil. It adds a lot of kind of uncertainty in terms of your day to day. What was weird is that, statistically, it was a huge number of people that were, whose parents were divorced, and every single one of my friends' parents were together. And it was just like, I was just like the weird outsider, which was like in any other bucket of 10 or 15 people, we'd be a 50-50 split instead of me being the only one. But, so that provided some challenges. Just, mom moved from where we grew up. Didn't get along with dad and that side of the family as much, but he was, he lived near where all the people I knew were, and the school and the people, like the whole ecosystem of my life was with him. And so, lived with mom for a year, then kind of moved in with dad through high school, teenage years. I had a really unique upbringing in that I had basically no oversight whatsoever. I had the entire floor, the whole basement floor of the house to myself with a private bathroom, private exit. So I kind of came and went as I pleased. Nobody really said anything, which in some ways was good. In some ways was bad. As a 14, 15-year-old, you can get into a lot of trouble, of course, and as I did. But I think that freedom and that, I really had no guidance. I think a lot of that kind of drove this. Well, why don't you just do this because this is what you want to do? And I didn't have anybody saying no. And so I really kind of played by my own rules for a really long time, which I think in the end worked out to be positive. But at the time I was a bit of a nightmare to deal with for the 2 or 3 days a week I actually showed up at home. I was always like fairly entrepreneurial. I had, all kinds of little businesses. From the time I was 13, I was pretty much making enough money to support myself and beyond. I had all kinds of weird random jobs. I was a break dancer. I worked at a gun club. I was a bingo caller later on. I experimented with a lot of different random jobs and things as I was growing up. But yeah, since, even from the time I was, 14, 15 in grade 10, give or take, whatever age that is, I technically was making enough money to support myself. So didn't need anything from anybody, no rules or timelines or regulations in my life. And so I did what any kid at that age would do. I spent it all frivolously and had a wonderful time. Um, yeah, didn't save a dime, but I fueled and paid for all of the parties that we had all through high school. So it was kind of a fun adventure in that way. And then after high school, during high school I was working for a flooring company. I was in sales. And I was really, really good. Even young, I was selling, $10, $15, $20,000 installations into people's homes, even at 15, 16, 17 years old. And so I knew there was something with me in sales, and I really always connected with that. I decided I had to go to university right out of high school. I barely got in. Like all the schools I wanted to get into, they're like, no, but you can go to this like weird offshoot remote version of our school. And I was like, sure, why not? Didn't fare very well. The book classroom learning for me was really always a big challenge. I was a terrible student through everything, high school and university. I got an academic probation a lot. I kind of just threw in the hat pretty early. And so I did 1 year. I don't even know if I think I passed a couple courses, but it was just, really not a good fit, really not meant to be for me. And so at that time, I was like, great. So I'm 19 or 20 years old and no school. What am I going to do? And I never had a lot of entrepreneurial influence around me. Nobody in my family was really doing it. And I really had no connection to it. So it was in me, but I had nothing to, foster it and have it grow. So I went back to the flooring store. I remember a conversation the day I dropped out. I called them and I said, hey, I need a job. I'm going to start on Monday. And they're like, well, we're kind of overstaffed and this and this and that. And I said, do you remember how much money I made you before? And they're like, let me get back to you. And within 20 minutes, they're like, see you Monday. We'll find some space. Because I honestly would have worked on commission only. It was just a really easy job to me. So I did that for a couple more years, kind of wasted my not wasted, but just, lifestyle wise, I wasted my kind of early 20s. And when I hit 24, so I was like, you know what, I got to grow up. I got to get a job. I got to do the adult thing. Right. So I got a job for an insurance company doing phone intake or whatever. I quickly accelerated through that because it was a job role that, we had a bunch of people that were a bit older who were kind of there for life. And it was so easy to just fly out of that position into the next. And I worked there for about 6 years. I had, some good times. I ended up moving to Vancouver, British Columbia for 2 years. They flew me out there to work for a couple of years during the Olympics, actually. So it was quite a lot of fun. But I never really liked it. But I liked the security. I liked the benefits. I liked the vacation. I liked the company car. I liked the home office. It checked boxes and it kept me, with money in my pocket. And so I stayed there for a really, really long time, knowing full well that it wasn't the right fit for me, but I didn't have any other prospects. And to be honest, I was a little bit of a desperate employee in a way that I thought with the skill set that I had, and not really a vision for what could be. I was like, well, no one else is going to hire me. I don't meet qualifications for any of this stuff. And so the whole time it was knowing that it wasn't right to be there, but also knowing that I couldn't fit into the mold in more scenarios than not. And this is going back 10 years now. Now, people, big, important, interesting companies are kind of just saying if you've got a skill set, we don't really care about the education as much. But 10 years ago, it was still on everybody's radar and it was a requirement to get in the door to have a conversation. So I lived in this perpetual fear of, losing the stability, feeling like I had nowhere to go, but feeling like I wasn't in the right spot. And it was just a really awful place to be. in the midst of that, I was married. At that point, we knew that we weren't a good fit for each other, and so we continued longer than it should have, and just so it was kind of this like really crappy culmination into my 20. I was 28 or 29 at the time, and I was like, what am I doing? I'm going to turn 30. Every day is miserable, work and home. I mean, I was just in a really bad spot. And the tipping point was actually an incident. I was sitting in my car, waiting outside of the office. I was just like, I had a home office, but I went into the office a fair amount as well, for whatever reason. And I had, you could call it an epiphany. You could also call it a panic attack. It was probably a bit of both. That was it. I had it. There's no scenario where I could move on past today. I mean, I remember reaching for the door handle of my car and my body just started trembling and I started bawling. Like I had no control over my limbs and I lost it. Got on the phone with, my wife, my mom, my dad, started talking to people I had to sort out what was going on in my head. I had no control. And everybody said, hey, smart path is get it together, take a few minutes, go in, aggressively look for a new job, and then, it'll all work out. It'll always all work out. But the truth is it was coming from people who were always going to have jobs. And so even if they were miserable, it was like, well, then it would be a different job or just suck it up and do this job. And so, it really hit me exiting the car after agreeing that I was going to keep this job. The second I opened the door, I knew I was done. I knew there was no scenario that I was going to stay on board. And I walked in and I immediately quit. I think I stayed on for a couple more days to show them the projects I was working on, but genuinely was just completely checked out. And it was freeing. It was also terrifying. I mean, I had, maybe 30, 40 grand in the bank and that was it. So it wasn't like I was set and it wasn't like living in downtown Toronto was super affordable. So, that runway doesn't last that long. And I remember sitting in my backyard about 2 weeks later, drinking with my friend Steve and soon to become business partner. And he goes, we were just talking about apps because apps were, 9 years ago, there was, this trending thing, cool stuff coming up. And a lot of companies were bringing their stuff into the phones. And we were thinking about what could we make a robot to help people do? What could this be? So we went through this huge myriad of different things and we're like, you know what? Groceries. We're going to make a grocery shopping robot. It's going to be called Gbot. We're going to take over the world. We were convinced we were going to take over the world. Not so much, but what ended up happening, that actually turned into the business I run today. So that business was launched early 2013. And we started developing it. We started, hired it. We brought on a partner who was a software developer. We put him on salary. We put another person on salary. We're like, make the grocery shopping robot. And it's going to, at its core, it was a really cool idea. In fact, we went on to, so Dragon's Den is like the competitor to Shark Tank. It's like the Canadian version. And they had made another, like a spin-off series specifically for tech. And so we, registered and we went on, and Michelle Romanow, who's now a big investor on the main show, actually said yes to us. And she loved the idea. And she's like, I have a huge user base and I can tap you right into them. We were like jacked. We thought we were like set. A couple of weeks later, Groupon, who had just bought her company, had basically said like, no, you got to back away from this deal. They're a direct competitor. You can't move forward, because she had just sold to Groupon and Groupon told her to back off of it. So it was too bad. That actually could have been the thing that turned it into a real business. But as we kind of realized the, development's slow, nothing's kind of coming together as quickly as we need. We had a couple of customers already and said, hey, we're going to grandfather you in. You're going to buy ad space, give us $5,000 or $10,000, which was really experimental money for the size of the companies we were talking to. And when we realized we weren't going to be done anytime soon, I went to them and said, listen, I don't want to give you this money back, but I don't want you to wait. So let us market this. Throw away money to you. You were expecting it to go to zero. Let us see what we can do with it. And so over the weekend, I watched YouTube endlessly. I had to be 40 hours. I basically didn't sleep. And I'm like, I'm going to learn how to do Google ads, which, I don't even know Facebook ads 10 years ago. They may have kind of just been coming out, but Google was like the platform. And so I watched and came out of the other side, and I'm like, great, here's the rollout plan. We're going to run with this. And so we started running ads. The 2 clients that we had for Gbot that I started running ads for are still clients today, 8 years later. They're still active clients with us. So really, like, we really worked our faces off to make sure it kind of came together. And then once we decided kind of the software was out of the picture, I kind of bought out the business, because we had built up the marketing a bit. So I bought that out from my 2 partners, turned it into my own company. And then that was that's leading up to, pretty close to today. And so, yeah, we've been a remote agency. I've been living remotely. We were in Portugal for a while, and now we're in Mexico, and we kind of just float around. And so we're a small team. I work about 15 hours inside of that business, but I have an operator who oversees all of our contractors and all of our virtual assistants to make sure everything runs smoothly and gets done. And we have a roster of about 12 clients, pays for all of our life expenses, all of the salaries I need. And so that's kind of like the cash cow thing that keeps me floating. I spend about 15 hours a week in that business, just like overseeing and strategy and stuff. And then, so what I started doing kind of after I got that solidified is I started offering coaching to friends of mine who, offered business services, but were like, I'm just creating a job for myself and I'm drowning in my own work. And I was like, oh, well, I built this system and I stopped working in the company. So why don't I just show you how to do it? And at first it was just a couple of immediate friends of mine. I said, I'm just going to charge you like a couple $1,000 just to pay for the time, but like, let's see if we can do this together. And it went really, really, really well. And so now I'm really opening that side of the thing, helping other people do it.
I love it. It's so cool. I love that you're able to just travel around from like country to country to country, just like live wherever you want. Is your business then registered in Canada? Where's your business actually registered at?
Yeah, so it's registered in Ontario. So it's not federal, it's a provincial incorporation. We also, a lot of our clients are in the US. So I have a separate tax firm. So it's basically, there's a tax exemption for Canadians that have US clients, as long as we don't have operations in the US. We just have clients there. So they write off all the money that we do tax-free in the US. But it's all under one Canadian corporation. I just have to use 2 different accounting firms to make sure that I'm filing appropriately in the US.
Interesting. So there is a way for it to, where it's located right now, to scapegoat quite a bit of the tax liability, the way you've run your business.
Yeah, I mean, I think if your ratio of revenue starts creeping too far to like mostly US and very little Canadian, I think we may have a problem. But right now, I think we have it around 50-50. And so as long as we don't go too far, we haven't had any problems to date. We've been filing that way for 5 years now. Awesome. We haven't had any problems. So I think I
love that. I think that's a big part, where learning the intricacies of how you're specific, because every type of property is taxed differently, and every type of business is taxed differently. And so that's actually one of the big issues right now, kind of going through the American government, Congress, is that it comes across to the public and in media as, oh, we need to tax the wealthy people more. And it has really nothing to do with, I mean, it kind of does, but not really about the wealthy people, but more specifically, Facebook, Google, these companies, the tech companies, their tax structure has not caught up with how much percentage of the global economy they're taking. And that's the bigger issue, is that their companies are still being taxed how they were taxed in 1980 when we first restructured our taxes. And our taxes really haven't been restructured as far as the philosophy goes since the 1980s, when technology was like a nothing burger, and so there was nothing there to tax them properly. And now they're the biggest industry in the global economy. And so now it's like, okay, well, we need to redo our taxes, our tax philosophy, to make sure we're actually being taxed properly. Anyway, so it's fascinating as a business owner to be thinking about that. And also, how can I get my main moneymaker into a different tax by providing a slightly different service so that it gets into a different tax bracket? So interesting there. I'm curious, if we went back to your childhood, how many siblings do you have?
So I have one sister. And then so my mom remarried and he had two sons already. And my dad remarried and she had a son and two daughters. So extended like step family, I guess there was seven of us. And we kind of saw them every other week, but I grew up with just one sister.
And is that older or younger?
Younger. She's 3 years younger. She actually was a full-time employee of mine for a while. I caught her actually during mat leave. And I'm really bad with like administrative stuff. I'm terrible with it, which is why I don't operate these things. I was like, I feel like I'm broke. And she's like, well, let me take a look. Cause she was running a vet clinic at the time. So let me look through your invoices. And she's like, there's like $96,000 sitting there. Go collect it. I was like, if I give you 10%, will you collect it? She's like, yeah, fine. So she had it like collected in 3 weeks, like cash in the door. I was like, can I just hire you to do this stuff? She's like, actually, yeah. So
yeah,
she was a full-time employee for 5 years, and she's just recently left to go back into veterinary medicine, where her passion is. So
awesome. Hey, that's cool. I love those little stories. I'm just curious because I have 11 siblings. So to contrast the difference between us and yet the similarities is so fascinating. So you had due to divorce and maybe relationships and where they were valued, you had very little oversight. You're probably somewhat close to the generation of what they would call a latchkey kid, and as far as generation goes, but you didn't have a lack of siblings. You didn't have so many siblings that you're like the middle child and get ignored. So it had to have been a different reason. But I think there's a lot of value in growing up very much independent. I've tried to convince all of my friends that independence is the number one, for me at least, it's the number one priority in Sam's life. Like, I love my independence, but it does come with some different mindsets. So I'm curious. I feel like there's three different areas potentially that you could identify with initially. So I think I know where you're at now with all of this, but when you're going through it, I'm curious if you can speak to the different kind of mindsets here. So one is freedom, right? You're kind of grateful. You see your other friends and they have to be home by a certain time and they have XYZ expectations. You're like, literally, my parents don't even know where I am and they don't want to. Like, they actually prefer that they don't have to think about me, right? So there's a level of freedom that's really nice, but the contrast to that is you see that your friends actually have people who do care about them, and so this is where you start to at least have some level of recognition as you get older. Am I neglected? Was I abandoned by my family? Like, they just got divorced and I'm just here and it's their legal responsibility, but they have no real commitment or emotion towards taking care of me. So kind of talk about those different mindsets, because I think that's a huge, from a perspective of what holds people back, it's those curiosities, like they don't really know what their identity is, or they adopted some identity that's no longer serving them. So can you speak to those kind of three different mindsets and if or when you had them?
Sure. Yeah. So I think, I would say, so from just like the dynamic of the family. So my mom was always like very involved and to this day is. My dad's a little bit more detached. Like, we're friendly. Like we talk every week and stuff. But I think, my mom was always that like maternal figure. And so when I kind of moved out from her house, and I was going there every other weekend, but it was so funny because when I was at her house, it was like I was like a normal kid, like just a normal teenager, hang out with the family, sit down for dinner, all of these components. And then kind of the other 12 days were just like I was just out in the world doing stuff. And so it was strange because there was this shift from like being parented to not, back and forth. I think I spent a decent amount of time being an angry kid. I don't know if it's just like that all kids are angry because they're hormonal in their teens, but I would say that I was, and I think I did a lot of stupid stuff, but I also think that I used a lot of that into learning how to rely on myself, almost to a fault, because I think partnerships, like relationships that I've had later, it's kind of discovered to be like, Mike has a really hard time letting anyone else help or be involved or be responsible for anything, because I'm very like, I'll just deal with it. You sit over here. But yeah, I mean, I was, angry for a while. Part of it would have just been, I guess that you have a certain way about growing up and there's a dynamic within your life. And then the dynamic just kind of like shifts out from under you and you just kind of fall in and you're like, oh, well, what do I do with myself? What am I supposed to do? Like, what is life supposed to look like? And I think in a lot of ways it was good making it up because I went through all my dumb phases very rapidly. Because there was, the idea like nobody likes being told what to do. Usually you do something stupid and then someone tells you you're not supposed to do that or you can't do that. I kind of just saw this back end to it where it was like, okay, then these people are just angry. No one's telling me what to do. And I was like, well, why would I want to make people angry? Okay, well, I'm just not going to do it anymore. So I think I actually, in some ways, like self-matured really quickly. But I do think there was a lot of deficiencies in, just like my idea of family and that structure. And I think, the first marriage that I was in, I got married when I was 22 or 23. And I think a lot of those problems came up during that time. And that's probably one of the biggest reasons why, we didn't work out. And so I've actually started working through a lot of that in therapy, which I never, ever, like I went to one session when my parents first split as like a court mandated thing. And I was like, this is stupid. I'm not going to go again. And then 15, 20 years later, I was like, I should probably talk through some of this stuff because, I never really, I think it's that I never really learned to ask certain questions or pay attention to certain things because I was always in this like survival mode and like make sure you're one step ahead, make sure this thing's taken care of, make sure that's taken care of. And so you spend enough time that way, you don't really think about emotions or there's a lot of stuff you don't consider. And I think it's, not good to be a well-balanced human and not have that stuff. And so I've worked through that in the last year and a bit.
Yeah. So I'm curious, do you feel like growing up, do you feel like it made you, again, these are questions that I've had about my own experience, right? Because I like I said, I'm the seventh of 11 kids. And at age so we were all homeschooled. So we had maybe more oversight than most, but also a lot more freedom. Because as soon as you got your homework done, you could go do whatever you want, right? You could run around town, you could whatever. And as long as the police didn't call parents, then you were good, right? And as I began to get older, I actually started working full time when I was 11 years old in like a honey extracting plant. Then I went to being a landscaper, then a bricklayer, then a lifeguard, and very similar things. I'm like, I've tried everything. By the time I was 18, I had already had 11 different jobs. I'd been providing for the most part for myself, and just wasting my money, same as you. But what was interesting is, it almost left me in some respects without a childhood. Like other people would be like, man, you had so much more fun. But I'm like, yeah, I had a lot more fun, but I've been an adult since I was 11 years old. So
right. Yeah.
Like, I don't even know what adulting looks like, but it did create kind of an inability to a degree to connect with other teenagers. When I was a teenager, I'd go to the parties. I would try and be a teenager like everybody else. But the reality was, I honestly looked at a lot of that as kind of silliness, or the arguments they would have with their parents, or like their parents are nagging them to get something done. I'm like, just get it done. Like, I'll do it for you so we can go play. Like, this is stupid. Why are we still having this conversation? So there was a certain level of maturity in some areas, just as you said, but there was others that you were immature in, the emotional side, I would say, as far as connection and playfulness and creativeness, that just didn't really exist a lot. So I'm curious, how much did that, or were you even conscious of that discrepancy growing up? Like, did you feel like your friends were just like you? Did you feel like, man, they have no idea what's going on in the world, and maybe that's nice, is that I'm with a bunch of people who have no idea what really is reality? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, so I resonate with pretty much everything you just said in terms of like the thought process and the format. I did have a core kind of group of friends, but while they were like, hey, we're just going to like go and smoke weed tonight, I was like, okay, well, like I'm going to go to work and make money at 6 a.m. So no, And so, but what's interesting, so I was not cognizant of anything at that time. I was pretty much just like blocking everything out and just making sure I was like productive and moving forward and taking care of myself. That's pretty much my only mindset then. I really didn't slow down that process until my late 20s. I was just like when I started building the software company, I was like, just work 17 hours a day, get it done. Like I just never kind of came out of that. And then it took me, a bit of a shock to move past it. But no, I wasn't really aware of any of that at the time. Looking back, I was made aware of it. But it was interesting because my kind of core group of friends, a lot of people will joke about, friends from high school, and I don't have many of them. But what's interesting is there is like eight of us that all have kept in touch, and they're all actually most of my friends are like engineers and accountants and different. So everyone has their own professional career, but we keep in touch because we have kind of a shared value system. We were all always kind of good people, and so we don't have that much in common. But we've kept a bond. We talk to each other twice a year, basically, like Super Bowl and then something in the summer. That's basically the schedule. But it is nice to see them, and I don't feel like it's these like the idea of that the way you think about it from the movies, like the loser high school friends. I had a great group of guys that I was friends with, and I'm still friends with to the day. But yeah, I was not aware. The only thing I would say is I did spend a lot of time at their families' homes. Like even the girl that I used to walk to school with in the mornings, I would leave my house where there may or may not have been breakfast, something going on. But I would leave my house and I would go to her family's house, and I would just hang out there for half an hour and just like spend time with them. Or like, I would never really have, unless we were playing pool or ping pong, because I had both in the basement. But I would say like the way that I would relax would be to actually be with other people's families and like hanging out in that ecosystem. So I think there was some subconscious desire, but it wasn't like I was putting my finger on it and identifying it. It was just like, that's just how I spent my time, was connecting with other people's families that way.
That's fascinating. I spent a lot of time with other people, and it was interesting getting married because my wife is very family oriented, which is, I would say I'm very family oriented, but my family is my friends, right? So when I think of my family, I think one, my immediate siblings, they're my friends. And also my friends are my friends. So they're this and equal commitment to both relationships, right? To biological family members or to friends that I believe are just as much my brothers as anybody else, right? It's the same type of relationship and commitment and loyalty to both, right? And that's very different than how my wife grew up, where it was very much like very, very, very family oriented. Everybody still sees each other. They all live within, 30 miles of each other. Right. And it's just like not at all how I grew up. And so it's fascinating. And I knew when I was getting married, I intentionally wanted to marry into a more family oriented household to kind of draw me, or because I already had the other extreme in my life growing up. And so to try and meld those and say, okay, I know this is going to be a struggle. I know this is very, very different than what I'm used to, but I want to experience it. And I want that to potentially be part of my future, or at least have the option for it to be part of my future. So it's fascinating. How often do you think, now you've run a business for, I don't know, a few years now. Yep. How often does it start out? Let me rephrase this. How often do you feel like it ends the way you intended it to be when you started?
Never, not even close.
No, I agree. And the reason I wanted you to say that is so many people, they're waiting to get started on their dream because they want their dream to be the successful thing. And in my experience, my initial dream that I have is never what I end up loving and being thrilled about. So talk about that. Was it hard to let go of the initial concept and move into those next phases, or do you feel like it was a natural transition? Because I've had people on the show with both experiences. I'm just curious about yours.
Yeah, so I have had both experiences within myself. So when we had this plan for the software business, it was like 30-page investor deck, roadmaps. I mean, we had it all figured out. We thought we did, and the truth was that those plans mean nothing without execution. And through execution, those plans need to dynamically change, or you're going to fail. because your thesis about how a customer is going to interact with something or how long someone's going to stay using something, all of it's a thesis. And all of it is variable on every unique individual and human person that interacts with the brand, whether it's business to business or business to consumer. So you know nothing. You can have a thesis, but you can't know anything. It's impossible. So I think with the software one, it was weird because we're like, no, but like, this is how this is going to go. Why isn't it happening? Let's keep putting resources in to make this happen. And then when that kind of folded in, the marketing thing came so organic. It was like, I don't know, I just like learned how. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Like I love buying Google ads. I enjoyed it. And so when we were kind of like, okay, I don't know about this software, the marketing thing was like, I don't have any context for what's supposed to be. I didn't go to school. I've never worked for an agency before. I was just like, if you need clients and I can make an ad that brings the client, then you pay me to do it, right? Right? Okay, great. And so like that was my entire business thesis, is like, great. And then when you like it, you write nice words, and I'm going to use those nice words to tell other people to come work with me, right? Okay, great. And so I didn't have a plan at all. I had no context for what it was going to be. I just knew I enjoyed doing it and I could make a difference for somebody in doing it. And I was like, let's do more of it. So yeah, I mean, like, punched in the face on the software side. And then the marketing thing it's felt like nothing to run. Just because, we make sure we execute, people like it, they bring us more people, and we keep making money. So, polar opposites, but they were kind of running simultaneously. So I was really torn by, that concept when we were having both running.
Yeah, I just have found that that's such I found it holding myself back sometimes, where I'm so married to the idea of what I started out with. And I'm like, I love this and I don't really want to pivot. I don't really want to start doing something else because I'm still like, I haven't found a way to make my original, like my heart desire connect with the thing that financially makes sense to pivot to. My heart isn't pivoting to that yet. And so it's like, oh man, I know that financially that would make a lot of sense, but my heart's still not in the pivot. My heart's still in this thing that isn't really producing tons of money or the amount of money that it could. And I know I could go make more money somewhere else, but I just don't want to pivot yet. So it's just interesting in different things. It's happened with my podcast. It's happened with my other business, happened with the books that I've written, that like, oh, how far do I pivot? How far off? And at what point do you just go start a whole nother company? Like you said,
right.
Okay, well, I've got this going. How about I just teach my friends and charge them a little bit? And then eventually you're like, I could actually make this a company. And at what point do you make it a separate company to go do something completely off the wall that you didn't think you'd ever be interested in, but you are?
Yeah. One thing that I would say, so when COVID hit, so the reason I started coaching people is so I was offering marketing training to non-essential businesses, basically. Like the nature of my product required them to be those types of businesses. And we were doing about 40 grand a month with this training product. And when COVID hit, I turned to my team and I said, I virtually turned, they weren't in the room. I was like, this product is dead in a week. They're going into lockdown. This is going to go on for way longer than we thought. All of the money that we're making is going to zero next week. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I promise you it's going. And it literally did. We were doing 40 grand a month. I haven't seen a dime since last April on it. That's just the nature of it. And so I think, but what I did was what I've always done when I need to build back up is I basically had a whole bunch of people share a post that I made that said, I'm going to give away 50 hours of my marketing and business strategy time in 30-minute blocks because COVID is hurting your business and you don't know what to do. Get in touch with me. And I ended up fulfilling about 38 of those meetings. So I put in quite a bit of time. The common thread that was holding people back is this idea of this is how this other person does it. And this is the way that the industry expects it and it has to be. And so I have to do that. Which is insane to me because I never had any of the guidelines. So I was always just like, why don't I just call 100 people and ask them if they want marketing? It's like, why not? But what was holding people back was like, well, no, but these other bigger companies, they do it this way. Like, we're in the same industry, they do it this way. I'm like, which means what? Like, just make up a different product, tailor it to what fits your client's needs right now. Like, all business is delivering value, or perceived, as long as there's value perceived on the other end, it's just an exchange. So like, why do you have to advertise this? Like, why can't you change? And so of 38 people, the majority of those people were in the boat of like, well, I can't market myself that way. I can't change my product to this thing. And my question was always why, and I never once got a good answer. So I think as people are, if they're resonating with that story at all, it's like, if you want to make something work, now there is a fine line between like passion and delusion, granted, and I don't know where that is for everyone. It's your talent is the variable of success in a lot of ways. But what I would say is, don't give up until you've grabbed ideas from every different industry, every style of everything under the sun. Just try it. Because just because other people don't recognize this as the way to do it means zero. Business is a game. And if you don't, if you put rules, then you go up and down with the way that the rules are controlled, right? But there's no one holding you to that. There's no reason why you have to do it. So to me, really just trying to think outside the box on like, how do I grow this? Like, why can't you call someone and ask them to blast it out to their email list? Why can't you?
Yeah, it was interesting. So I'm on Clubhouse. I don't know if you've gotten on Clubhouse yet. Hopefully, I love that app. But I was listening to a guy on there. His name's JT Fox. I don't get paid to shout him out or anything, but I think he's worth listening to. But one of the things he said, it was like a rapid, because most of the time he just moderates and interviews other people. But this one time, Saturday morning or something, it was like 30 minutes of him like actually coaching. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. But he said something about thinking outside the box. He said 6-figure earners, they think outside the box. 7 and 8 figures, they are throwing the box away, right? Like they're throwing it out the window. But a 9 and 10 figure plus earner, they're the ones who are creating the box for you to think in. And so often people think, just as you were saying, I have got to live in this box. I've got to do it the way that everybody else is doing it. And the reality is you're just playing to the beat of somebody else's drum, and they will own your income, maybe not directly, but indirectly forever. And so I think actually the benefit is being able to see how something that isn't part of your industry could be part of your industry. I think that's where I have another coach that I work with, Travis Brady, and that's their whole brand is next gen marketing or next gen branding. And the whole purpose of their branding is to say, look, we're going to take something from the clothing industry, something from the food industry, something from the tech industry, and we're going to force these things like magnets that are diametrically opposed. We're going to cram them into this little box and make something of it so that it shows up the way nobody else was expecting it to show up. I mean, Clubhouse, for instance, there's nothing else out there. Clubhouse is the entirely unique platform that's a combination of podcasts, Zoom, Facebook Lives, Instagram. Like, it's this combination of like, where did this even... It's hard to describe to people because it's just like, I don't know. You just have to go experience it because there's no actual description yet for it. Like there is no description. Now Twitter's going to have their thing and Facebook and all these companies, they're going to create their own voice thing. Mm-hmm. But when it's created, there's still not really like an adequate definition of what Clubhouse even is. So they literally crammed together and made this industry out of nothing. And it will I think it will revolutionize the way social media is done. Doesn't mean that TikTok and Instagram and they're all going to go the way of the dodo bird necessarily, but this platform is a combination of all just a bunch of weird things that somehow perfect timing, right? If it had come out in 2018, it probably wouldn't be that big, but a year after everybody's starving for communication globally, it's a perfect timing. Everything was perfect for this app to be what it is. So it is fascinating to see how things can become when you're able to do that. So is that what your coaching looks like a lot right now, is just helping people be more innovative with their their marketing?
To some extent, I think most people. So I would say the majority of people that I work with are making kind of like, between 50,000 and maybe even a bit lower, 40 to 200,000, give or take.
A month or a year?
A year. Yeah.
Okay.
And so what typically happens within that is you end up, you obviously have a good flow. People trust you and they buy from you. That exists, or else you wouldn't have any money. But there's something about your, either your, position or your price or your marketing where you get a bunch of client yeses, and then you're like, well, crap, I got to go execute all this stuff. Like, how am I going to keep up? I'm toast. Or you want to get the yeses, and so you're lowering your price, and then you're like, man, I'm gonna have to do all this work for that. Like, what am I doing? People that get stuck and they don't know how to go from working 50 to 70 hours a week down to 20, but like double or triple what they're making. That's my sweet spot. So people that can already sell. For me, it's about how is your product actually positioned? How are you talking about it? How are you communicating it? Online and sales presentations. All these pieces. Most people, my friend Curran is a great example. He offers these entrepreneur dinners. He creates curated dining experiences for people, and it's magical what he does. And a year and a half ago, we were talking about a number. He goes, "Do you think I could make X to do this? It's a 2-hour dinner facilitation." Sounds like it doesn't. It's hard to describe the product. It's really incredible. His company is Jube, Jube.ca. The way he curates and brings people together, just shortens sales cycles and brings internal HR. He's an incredible human. But his question for me, this is a year and a bit ago, was, can I make X to do a 2-hour dinner facilitation? And I said, you could, but you could also multiply that by 7. And he's like, you can't. There's no scenario where I can charge 5 figures for 1 2-hour dinner. And I was like,
I'd pay that.
Yes, you can.
Personally, I have paid that, so I already know that I would pay that.
And so I think just because I think we, when we're the solopreneur, we have expertise in a couple of different buckets. And usually that's like executing the thing. And that's not necessarily business systems. That's not necessarily marketing or sales or pricing. And so having that outside set of eyes is where I kind of come in and say, if you want to charge $2,000, you got to be at 8. But with 8, you need to speak about it like this. And so, we record, any sales and discovery calls, you record them, I go listen to them, we fix the problems. And so it's a very hands-on process of how do you increase your price by 3 to 7 times? And then once you have the bandwidth of that extra capital, how do you put people in place so that you don't have to do all the crap you don't want to do? And I'm not saying you exit the business entirely. For me, I love being on podcasts. I love being on strategy calls. So those are my, $1,000 an hour tasks, as I call them. But I try and only do that. All of the other administrative, invoicing, client services, I don't touch any of it. And I've been detached from it. And it's I enjoy working now. I put in my couple, I have my 3 hours of things that I have to do, and I know they move the business forward. And then I spend the rest of my time building other products or getting more sales or whatever I want to do. And so there's a magic to just doing the things that you're awesome at all day.
Yeah, it still gives me anxiety because I have had enough bad experiences of trying to hand something off to somebody and it not being done to a satisfactory level, and then I have to go in and do it.
Yeah.
To make up for the complaints. And it's this is more stress worrying about what might not be satisfactory than just freaking doing it. And that does hold me back personally. I know that of getting to a point where I know that somebody else is good enough and I say good enough, right? They don't have to be Sam. I don't expect anybody to be Sam. And I'm not even saying, so there's a funny story. I was on my, I went on a Christian mission to teach about Christ in Scotland and Ireland. And part of the structure is that we have we're in companionships, and then this new person comes in, you kind of train them about the area, and then you go to another area, and this is the system. Well, as part of that, you have to update the records of the books. Like you got journals of, books of what happened, who'd you talk to, because there's going to be people there for years to come. Well, I was this controlling person, like I am, right? I like to be in control of everything in my life that I can be. So I was the one who always updated these books, and based on the other people that I was trained by, I did a lot better than they did, right? So I had this opinion that I was better than anybody else, right? So finally, I allow the person I'm training, I'm like, okay, well, you got to do this. And although it was hard for me to let go, they were so much better at it than I was, right? So sometimes you think, oh, well, I don't want to let go because I don't know if you're going to be good enough. But then the reality is a lot of times they're far better than you ever could be at that task. So I just haven't experienced that yet, where they're far better than I am at what I'm supposed to do. So it's been interesting. Go for it.
So I'll give you the heartbreaking fact about what you're saying right now. When you hand something off to somebody and it's not up to your standard, it's entirely your fault.
Oh, I know it is. I 100% agree.
So we used to do that, like creative work and administrative stuff. And I was like, why? I don't understand why I can't get what I want from these people. What is happening? Why do these people all suck? And then I unpacked this process. So you'll see, like within our business, I have a girl that works with us 10 hours a week, and she files my emails. She grabs Zoom recordings from my meetings and from my coaching sessions and puts them in the right files. She updates records, in spreadsheets. She does all my calendar stuff. She reaches out to people to book stuff for me. She does all of that. There's a 40-page Google Slides deck that she owned when she came in. And I was like, read this, because this is every scenario. So if you're in my email and you see an email and it comes across this way, if it's this, it goes here. If it's this, it goes there. If it's whatever, Slack me these 3 details of it and I'll give you feedback. And if you don't hear back in 24 hours, email me again. So by the time she got that, plus there's videos embedded in the thing, by the time she read that, we did 1.5 hours of training on Zoom, and I've never talked to her since. And she crushes it. So it's about building these processes. I did a talk on how to successfully hire a VA in my Facebook group, actually 2 days ago. It didn't record. I was furious, but I re-recorded it. But I'll actually send it to you. But it's how do you create those procedures in a way that they're foolproof? Because if your idea is like walking them through or like having a checklist, like it's going to fail. 100% it's going to fail. And it takes a lot of work to build them. But once they're built, you can drop anybody into the task who's qualified to use whatever programs and like done.
So do you ever feel that, and again, and this is, I'm sure, just my own personality that's way too much into my business. And again, all these things, I'm aware they hold me back. I just haven't committed the time yet to actually go have them not hold me back yet. Another thing I'm aware of, I haven't committed yet. But do you ever feel like when somebody else comes in and they do want to change it because they think, hey, this would actually be more effective if we did something else other than this? How do you handle that? Because there's the rigidness of like, no, you do exactly what I say, when I say, how I say, don't be creative. Don't think outside the box. Don't do anything. But then I think that can hold you back from the fact that things are changing on the ground every day, and especially when you're using somebody else's software that you didn't create, you have to make adjustments to their software. And then that pitch deck gets a little out of date every day. And then eventually in 2 years from now, that pitch deck is obsolete because now there's way better systems, way better everything. So how do you manage that with your VAs? Yeah.
So I have an 8-week feedback loop. So I have a meeting every 8 weeks where I go and I give them my rating. So whatever tasks that they're doing, I assign basically a rate, I call it a 50%, 75, 90, 100 plus. And so every week I'll be like, okay, it seemed like they completed all these on time. Great. It's 100%. This was okay, this was 75% this week. So I keep a scale on the back end of if they're keeping on top and if they're performing well. And if they're averagely performing very well, regardless of if they are though, with that 8-week check-in, I always ask them, what can we be doing to make your job better or easier? And that's where those come up. And they say, actually, this process seems redundant because we're doing this now. And so I think we should can we find a way to skip that? And then if it makes sense, I will deploy it, but I will make them, I don't want to say suffer, but I make them work through it. I don't ask for an opinion. I don't want an opinion for 8 weeks. And after 8 weeks, if that's an ongoing gnawing thing and you're like, this could be better, tell me. And then change it. And then in 8 weeks, when you've given it time to ebb and flow, give me the update. Hey, are we holding on to this practice? Do we want to go back? Because oftentimes they think it's going to be easier because they're not thinking about steps in the middle. So I'll let them go down with that and then just say, is that going to stay or do we want to go back to the other one? And 50-50. Sometimes they're like, actually, this saves me an hour a week, which is 10% of the time they're working. Or, oh yeah, actually I realized that this was making me miss this or that. So I'm going to go back to the old way. I see how it works now, but I don't ever force it. I ask them for the feedback and give the leeway, even if I don't think it's right, because the way I work and the way I process data is different anyway. So maybe it wouldn't work for me, but maybe it does work for them.
Right. And I think that's my problem is my thought process of how I process just information period and the types of steps, the amount of detail that I want may or may not be necessary and vice versa. Right. Maybe there's more detail that's needed. And I'm just I don't even know that I should care about the more detailed information. Cause I'm whatever, right. I've been okay what I'm doing. And why get this more detailed information? And why compile it in a certain way. So it's just fascinating. We are out of time, which is terrible, but we're going to get this. Where does somebody go if they want to connect with you?
Absolutely. So if you have a question or you want to connect direct, you can always email me, mike@marketme.co, marketme.co. Or if you just want to connect and kind of hang out socially, Instagram is probably my most active platform. It's @MikeAJMall.
Okay, awesome. What's your clubhouse for those of the cool kids who have iPhones? What's your clubhouse?
@Mike Mall.
@Mike Mall.
Yeah, and you'll MikeMoll. Sounds like A, pronounced O, MOLL. And I'm on there. I do about 1 or 2 rooms a week on marketing and all the stuff we talked about. I do kind of open forum Q&A kind of rooms on there. So
awesome. Love it. So here's a Legacy on Rapid Fire, 5 questions, 1 word, 1 sentence answers. You ready to go?
Yep.
Perfect. So what do you believe is holding you back from reaching the next level of your legacy today?
Thinking that I'm always right.
Amen. Same problem. And what do you believe the hardest thing you've ever accomplished is?
Staying alive for 8 years in business.
Perfect. What's the greatest accomplishment of your life thus far?
Being able to provide for my family.
Love that. And if you had one secret habit, mindset, or behavior that you believe contributes the most to your success, what would that be?
It would be remembering that nobody cares what you're doing and not to forget it and use that as motivation.
Love that. And what are 1 or 2 books you think could the Fuel Your Legacy audience could benefit from?
If you're just about to start your journey, there's a book called The Entrepreneurial Roller Coaster. If you want to know what's to come and what that's going to be all about, that is hands down the book. And for people that don't, sorry, that's more longer than 1 sentence. I'm done. The other book is the one Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. It was phenomenal on negotiating. It told his stories, and there was just so much stuff in there about all the ways that you are negotiating every part of your life wrong.
Have you been in his clubhouse rooms, where he's going through and taking everyday scenarios and dismantling them in real time?
No, I haven't. I actually spoke. I spoke behind him once at a conference, and we chatted a couple times, but I've never caught up.
Oh, dude, his clubhouse rooms are really good, freaking awesome. His voice, because when you read the book, I listen to stuff on Audible, and I listen to it double speed or triple speed. Mm-hmm. You don't realize it, but his voice is put you to sleep like no wonder he's an FBI hostage crisis negotiator, because it is like the most soothing, calm, boring, doesn't get excited voice. Even when it seems like he's getting excited by what he's saying, his voice is just the most even keel, boring, calm voice you could ever imagine. It's just,
that's why I was sad that he didn't read the Audible. It was someone else that read it.
If he would have read it, you would go to sleep, I think. His voice is so amazing. If just go listen to him on social media or somewhere. It's incredible. I love it. So here's the final question. The final question is, we're going to pretend that you've died. Okay. We're now 6 generations from now. So this is your great grandchildren. They're sitting around the kitchen table discussing the impact that you had on this world, the legacy you left. What do you want them to be saying about your legacy 6 generations from now?
I would say that, I don't think it's anything to do with like money I left. I think I want to create the blueprint for how to create freedom like I experience it now, so that other people can have it.
Love it. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mike, for joining us here and sharing your wisdom. If you get a chance, for the listener, please rank gold stars. 5 gold stars is what we decided was the best review. Anything less than that, it's okay too, but 5 is definitely the best. And then leave a nice review for Mike, and reach out to him in his other areas. Search him on the podcasting app. You'll be able to see him in different areas, different conversations on every podcast. I love it. So if you want to get to know him better there or on social media, go reach out to him, give him a follow and a like on his most recent posts. And thank you so much, Mike, for taking the time today.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. We'll catch you guys next time on the Fuel Your Legacy Show. Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me, and if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.